Good morning. Here we are, 2019, a new year, 1 week into it, and how exciting it's already been. We saw a massive decline in the market towards the end of 2018 as people began to get more and more concerned about the direction of trade talks, what was happening with the US government, and the risk that the Fed was going to precipitate a recession by hiking rates too quickly. In the first week of the year, we saw a massive profit warning from Apple on the back of declining sales in China. We saw concerns about the US airline industry, and together these created a massive crash in the first 2 days of the market. Everything looked likely to go to rack and ruin. And then the Fed came in last Friday and announced very carefully that it was going to be flexible about policy decisions going forward. The market immediately took that as a sign that the pace of rate rises is going to be slowed. And concurrent with that, we also had extremely strong US employment data, all of which suggests that we now have a very accommodative Federal Reserve and a still strong US economy. As a result, the stock market has rallied. However, the mood in the market has very much changed. We now have a consensus that expects a slowdown or even recession across the globe later this year and into next year. And that certainly looks possible. Since 2008, we have seen, albeit slow, but steady recovery from the 2008 crash. The global economy is getting tired, and there are many aspects that we could see recession stemming from. However, the main drivers this time would appear to be US-China trade. Now, many people think that the reason Apple is experiencing sales problems in China is due to the slowdown in the Chinese economy. We, however, think it's more likely that it's something to do with a nascent tech war between China and the US. Chinese consumers are actively favoring their own domestic products, Huawei and others, against the more expensive Apple choices, and they see it as the patriotic thing to do by Chinese. And it's also worth bearing in mind that while Apple is set up very much for the Western intranet ecosystem, Chinese consumers are using very different apps, which are more suited, perhaps, to their own domestic product. The degree to which the buy Chinese patriotic tech war impacts the rest of the US market is going to be very interesting through the rest of this year. So maybe we're wrong to be so concerned about Chinese slowdown, and we should be more concerned about what really Western companies can export into China. That's just one aspect. The second aspect that we should be concerned about is just how long the current Fed shift towards accommodative policy is going to last. Now, the Fed is in a very fortunate position. After 2008, the US central bank was able to stimulate the US economy very quickly. They did that by reflating the banks and getting banks lending again and not worrying about austerity. They piled into QE, flooded the market with money, and the result was not only a very strong economy, but also very strong banks. To a lesser degree, that also happened in the UK, although it was hampered by austerity. It did not happen in Europe. In Europe, we've seen something very, very different. We've seen the ECB, which remains essentially very bureaucratic and slow to react, kicking the can down the road, even though it has promised to do whatever it takes. As a result, their policy decisions and policy reactions have been extremely slow. We expect that is going to remain the case if the globe does go into recession this year, whereas the US and even the UK can afford to ease rates and perhaps even restart QE if required. The policy that is available to the ECB is going to be far more difficult. It's hamstrung by its internal setup. It's hamstrung by the fact the Germans are unwilling to ease up on austerity, which would be key for reflating these economies. And it's hamstrung by the amount of money that European governments have to go and borrow at almost zero interest rates. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in Europe, and I suspect that's where the main economic slowdown will occur. And we're not just talking here about the Brexit effects, which will be as significant on Europe as they will be in the UK. But that's maybe a story for another day.